Welcome to Time to Teach with Tammy, the podcast that gives tips, advice, and suggestions to teachers by a real teacher. So sit back and enjoy. And oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe. And we're back. Welcome to episode 64 of Time to Teach, entitled Classroom Decor. Too cute or too much? So yeah, that's the topic we are going to explore in today's episode. As always, these episodes, or most of these episodes, I shouldn't say all of them, but most of them are really inspired by things that are kind of going on in my own life. So recently we have just been kind of exploring or revisiting our classroom decoration policy. This is just kind of because we also have parents who are involved with decorating, and it's just would be helpful if we teachers and parents all are kind of on the same page. We know what to expect in terms of decorating. We know what our goals are, and we have some sort of expectations for that. So that has been kind of what has inspired this. So I did do a little bit of reading just to kind of see what is out there in terms of research or writing based on classroom decorations. I know I've definitely heard podcasts in the past that have spoken on this topic. I believe Jennifer Gonzalez, her Cult of Pedagogy, she has an episode on there that she interviewed someone, and they talked about classroom design and specifically a lot about the physical environment. And there are definitely some things out there that we know to be true. And I think things that we teachers, even if maybe we don't have hardcore data, if we think about what happens in our classrooms, we can probably agree that, I've seen this to be true or not to be true. So I don't really think that today's episode is going to be hugely long. I know I say that a lot, and then sometimes they do end up being longer than I anticipate, but I don't really think it's going to be super long just because I don't really have too much to say. It's kind of a cut and dry topic. I think, I shouldn't say cut and dry because it's not true, because there are some caveats to the whole decorating and the way we have our classroom set up. So to talk about this, I've looked at a couple of articles, and I'm just going to kind of caution this, that I think there could be, do your own research, please, just because anytime we are listening to others, you want to always double check those facts. So I'm looking at a couple of articles specifically that I will link in the show notes. But again, please do your own research. And this was just very lightly touching the surface. I didn't go into too much of depth, but I did think that maybe at another time possibly I could go into more depth. It doesn't quite mean I will, but it is an area that I've been interested in slightly. I think, just like I said, I've listened to a podcast before, and I've read some things online, and it's definitely piqued my interest. So let's just kind of go ahead and get started. The articles that I will be referencing are "Too many classroom decorations can distract young students," and then the other one, which comes from the conversation.com website's "Decoration or Distraction: The Aesthetics of Classrooms Matter, but Learning Matters More." So I think the biggest thing that we need to keep in mind is that there definitely are some factors that go into a classroom design that are going to optimize learning. So what did I see in these articles? Well, I saw that natural light has a direct correlation with positive learning outcomes. I think we do have to keep in mind that correlation does not always mean causation, but these are definitely things that we want to look at. So natural light, in this article, I think this one, I'm not entirely sure. I kind of pulled from both of these articles. So I do think it was the decoration or distraction article. But this article basically said natural sunlight, but not direct sunlight. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Nobody wants the intense heat direct from the sun. That's going to be uncomfortable, and when one is uncomfortable, learning is obviously going to be more challenging. So I don't think that's surprising, but I do like the idea of natural light because some classrooms really do lack that. So it's good to know that the natural light, there is a correlation between that and the positive learning outcomes. And then the other part is good air quality. Again, I don't think that's any big surprise there. You need good quality air. I think there was a mention also that if it's stifling hot, that is going to be very difficult to learn. And yeah, that makes sense. That makes good sense. So so far, I don't feel like there are any huge surprises right there. There was also a mention that the chairs and the desk should be right sized, and there should be flexibility within the learning spaces. So it didn't really go too in depth with that, but when I think of the chairs and the right size desks and whatnot and flexibility, I guess you would just want to keep in mind the flow of the room, how easily students are able to move around, their mobility. I have a few student chairs that are pretty small. My young students can definitely fit in it, but it seems more like it would probably be a good chairs for early childhood. I think I have these because I needed some additional chairs for my small groups, and I think people are under the assumption that because my grade is the youngest grade in elementary that those chairs would be appropriate, but it's actually not. The students dislike them because they're a little too small for them. They can fit in them, but they really prefer a slightly larger chair. There's not a huge difference, but the students always complain about those chairs. And I know the simple solution is get rid of those chairs, but also the other reality piece is it's really hard to find the other chairs, and people are not really willing to give up their chairs, not because they're not willing to give them up, but if imagine in my own classroom being the youngest ones in all of elementary, if they're even a little too small for my kiddos, of course for everyone else they're going to be way too small. So it's just a little bit challenging. So luckily I only have a small handful of those chairs because otherwise I think my kids would probably be very unhappy. And of course, if that was the first thing I thought about when I read this article, and it talked about the just right size. And I thought back to all the complaints I've gotten from my kids on these super small chairs. So at least they're not sitting in them the majority of the day, but it does make me wonder, how much more productive would they be if they had more comfortable chairs during the small group time. And not that I think they're uncomfortable. They're not. Like I said, I think it's just a little too small for them and they don't like that. And they are productive, but just maybe if they felt happier in a slightly larger chair, perhaps that would increase. It was definitely a thought I had as I read the article. Okay, moving on to some other points. So the other thing that came up was that too much color and too much displays or decorations have a negative effect. So, I'm just thinking about my classroom. I have so many classroom manipulatives, which is great, but they're all in these cubbies, and the cubbies are wide open for students to see. And I think that is a visual distraction for them. It would be nice. I have one of my colleagues in her old room, she just switched grade levels. So she's in a new room this year, but she had some material made so that she could cover her cubbies. And I keep thinking I probably need to do something like that because the storage is not covered. So you see right through it. You see everything. And if you are a young child and this is your learning environment, you have all of this visual noise being thrown at you. So keep in mind, it was this very thing that was shown to have a negative effect on learning. Too much color, too much displays or decorations. So then I'd also caution, how many learning displays do we have? I mean, we probably have a lot. I've been a little more conscious about this probably the last year or so as I've been hearing more and more about the distracting environments that classrooms can be, or any learning space. But still, I have posters up, I have things up, and I think it becomes a distraction, but it also becomes, if they are always up and they never come down, they're also going to be things that no longer are seen. Do you know what I mean? Because when you always see something, you cease to see it. Please tell me I'm not the only one. So if you always have something around you, specifically in your physical space, it becomes something that's really part of that physical space, so you stop seeing it. So this tells me that when we should have maybe a limited time that things are on display. This is really making me think of my vocabulary. I always, as we're working in our units, in addition to our high frequency words, which we call snap words, if you are a workshop model person, Lucy Calkins, you know this. I won't go into depth. It's not the point, and yet I'm still talking. But in any case, I'm always giving vocabulary. So I'll give them a word and a little picture, and we constantly refer back to those words. But I'm now thinking that they're always on visual display. So I wonder if I can put them on a poster where, as we need to reference them, or if it's a working time that students might want to reference them, it's in easy access, maybe a poster that gets covered or an area that they can go to, but it's not actually out on display. I'm kind of thinking as I'm talking, but I think this adds to the visual noise. So I'd like to take those. I would like to have them perhaps covered, because the thing is, yes, those words are going to change, but new words are taking their place. So if you see what I'm saying or hear what I'm saying, I don't know which sense I'm referring to, but basically what I'm trying to say is there would always be words out where the vocabulary words are. So maybe having a location, as I have now, where students can access them, but just having it covered, so they only uncover it, or I uncover it as it's needed, as opposed to it's always there and I no longer see it. I also think about this in terms of anchor charts. I think many of us are guilty of creating anchor charts that live there for a long time. So one thing that I don't know where this came from, but it was probably as recent as last year. Maybe it was something in a PLC, maybe an article in a PLC, but we kind of talked about that visual noise. I'm calling it visual noise. I don't think I've seen it referenced like that. I'm just really liking that term. But yeah, so basically, I think I read something about the visual noise. So I became a little more conscious again about anchor charts and needing to put a shelf life on it. We create an anchor chart, but really the anchor chart is a great learning chart. And it's very important to know that none of these articles say you should not have those things out. You definitely should, but that there's a shelf life to it, that it's not, they're very intentional. So like an anchor chart would be intentional. You're using it as you're teaching these things to your students. They refer to it, but then, maybe that is the scaffolding. And once they are, they've had time to work within the unit, you remove the anchor chart because they no longer need that. So it's kind of scaffolding them, giving them that extra support, but then removing it when it's no longer needed. Maybe you still have it in an easy to access place where other students who might still need access to it can still reach it or view it. But again, it's not something you want out all the time. I don't know, number charts, ABC charts, those are learning tools. I guess we need to be thoughtful on where they are. Our students have their desk tags with their names, and that has the ABCs. So I think that is probably very helpful. I know it is. ABCs on the wall, I guess it's only helpful if students are actually viewing them. Otherwise, again, it becomes maybe too much color, too much noise. So I guess we just really have to think about all those things that are on display. And if we have something that's strictly for decoration, is it enhancing or is it hurting the classroom environment? In terms of color, I mean, these articles all kind of talk about, the too much color is distracting. So I guess to me that says a nice thought out color scheme, which I do not have. I'm saying all of these things with the understanding that I need to make major changes in my classroom. I've been feeling this way for a while. I have yet to be able to make the major changes that I want to, but that's part of why I do the podcast, is because it helps me kind of reflect and hey, if I can help someone else at the same time, that's fantastic. So yeah, I think maybe a really well thought out color scheme. And I believe one of the articles that I read, it was more like natural and neutral colors that are going to be the best physical environment for students. And that's not to say that there's not really a place for bright colors. Perhaps there is, but I do think I saw something about neutral. I'm going to try to see if I can find which article actually said that, but there was something about the actual colors. And again, this is why I say also do your own research. I'm kind of summarizing and remembering what I can. But you definitely, if you're interested in really implementing things based on actual research, just, go ahead and do the actual research. I've done a little bit of reading, so I'm just more or less summarizing. This is not super exact. So, yeah, so really just kind of thinking about what's out on display, because those, again, had a direct correlation with a negative effect on student learning. But the other important thing too that they showed is that also when there was no color and no display, you would see low learning. And again, I think that makes sense too, because if you enjoy your physical environment, you're just going to feel better. You will probably be more motivated. I'm kind of guessing here. You would probably then work harder and, of course, have an increase in learning. And then the same is true with no displays. We know that if we're using our displays that we should have, ideally are displays that are more than just cute little posters, but they're teaching posters, or they're anchor charts that we've actually used to teach with. So of course, if we have no displays, that probably means we're not using anchor charts. And we know that anchor charts are powerful. They can be strong scaffolds for the students. My students are very young. Well, I mean, they're 5 and 6, so they're fairly young, I'll say. So I teach them through these visual displays, and those visual displays are so helpful. We just look at it, look at the picture, and the kiddos know exactly what that means. So I can't say enough about how powerful those displays actually are, like anchor charts and teaching posters. So nowhere in anything that I've read is it saying don't decorate your room. It's just really more saying be very thoughtful in how you're using that learning space. So you do want displays, but they should be more or less learning displays. And then just maybe have like a shelf life. We don't need things up forever because, like I said, when we have things that are up forever, they just become things that are no longer seen anymore, and that's not good for anyone. And I think the last little tidbit that I'd like to offer is, I think a classroom can be very distracting with all the visuals and the decorations. And of course, we know the noise and everything, though this episode is really more or less focusing on the visual part, the visual noise. This is just for, I feel, an average person would probably feel that a classroom might be a little bit busy. But perhaps, someone who is not dealing with learning issues would be okay in that environment, not necessarily at their optimum, but be okay in that environment. But I think we really have to keep our learners who might be struggling with things like attention or any type of learning issues that they might be dealing with. And we have to ask ourselves, what is this environment doing to them? Now, it is very difficult. It is extremely difficult. I know my own classroom, I really don't have storage. I don't feel I have super great storage in terms of being able to hide things. Everything's out there. There's lots of noise. And, it's difficult, but I think I can probably work on this to improve the physical environment. But we really want to keep those learners in mind. What is this environment doing for my students? And if it enhances the learning for that student, then it's probably a very good environment. But if it's an environment that makes it even more distracting and even more difficult, especially for someone with attention and or someone who has learning issues, then we really need to question what we're doing with that environment and just question, what is something I could change? We can't change everything at once. That's not possible. Never in any aspect of my life do I ever try to do that. I like little baby steps, but I think we can probably start somewhere. And I think I'm going to start with my vocabulary words. I'd like to see about tucking them away in an area that's still accessible, but maybe it's like a pull down poster when someone needs it. They have access, but they don't need to visibly be able to see it at any given point. So I think that's where I'm going to start. I just feel it's the easiest for me in my classroom. Okay, you guys, that is it. So I think I didn't do too bad. It is time for the wins and fails segment for the week. So my big win is I'm so super excited. I have all my kids in Seesaw. So I tried Seesaw, which if you don't know about Seesaw, look into it. It's an app. It's like a digital portfolio. I tried it a couple of years ago, and I think they have even improved since then. But when I first was just kind of dabbling in it and certainly didn't get its full potential at that time, but I'm ready to return to it after at least a year of not using it. I didn't use it last year, but I'm so excited, you guys. I have all my student names inputted in Seesaw, but what I'm most excited about, well, there are two things that I'm excited about. Number one, I started to think about how else can I use Seesaw. Well, I love the fact that Seesaw will allow their work, their products to be viewed by their family. I think that's fantastic. But the other thing I like, because my students don't do a whole lot of paper and pencil work, they're really, the reading or the writing, which is pencil and paper, or they're working on math, which is primarily manipulatives. There's not necessarily a whole lot of things for them to turn in. Even the writing, it's a workshop model, so they're constantly revisiting, rereading, revising. And I just thought, what a great way, in addition to being a portfolio, when they create things, they can take a picture of it, and it is also going to be, I'll be able to kind of use it to check in to see, well, what did you create when you were in that center or you were working in that rotation, and I was working in a group, or I was working with a one-on-one or a partnership, and I didn't get to see what you produced. This is going to allow me to get a glimpse into what they produced. Now I only have, how many do I have? 4 student iPads. Mine makes 5. But we did we wrote in a proposal to our technology department that ITAC, they are kind of in charge of the technology for classrooms, and we did get that approved. So in a few weeks I will have a 6th one. So I'll have to kind of figure out the logistics of this. I think maybe one group gets an iPad and they just take a picture as they have something produced. Hopefully times will stagger. But then the other thing that I'm super excited about, apparently Seesaw now has an activity tab. So you can actually create an activity and assign it to students. And it's compatible with Google Drive, with G Suite. So this is exciting because when I last used it, there was not this activities tab. You could not create activities for students. This is something I've been looking for a long time. Yes, I know Google Classroom does this. I've tried to use Google Classroom. I have used Google Classroom. For some reason, it's been very difficult for my little learners to log in and out of Classroom on the iPads. And even I've had difficulty with that. So I feel like this with Seesaw, when you sign in, you can just swipe a QR code. So it just kind of eliminates the whole signing in with a really long email address. And then I can now assign them activities. So I can create something in Google and I can add it to their Seesaw. And I think I can even differentiate between who gets what assignment. So it's great for differentiating and letting students go at their own pace. So I'm super excited about this. I will definitely be keeping you updated. My plan is to introduce Seesaw to my students tomorrow. I will actually be introducing the iPads and appropriate usage of it and Seesaw tomorrow. So I will soon be able to kind of update you with how that all works. Okay, fail for the week. I happen to be recording on a Monday, so haven't been very long, but I think I don't really have a fail per se. I did get to assess my students one-on-one. One of our support services teachers came in and she subbed for me. I pulled my students. I didn't get through every one of them, so I guess that's kind of my fail, but I never do. It's just too much. Even when you have a full day of a teacher subbing for you, it's way too much. But I was able to get through a really nice chunk. So I don't know, fail or not, I will continue to pull students during Daily 3 reading workshop. But that, of course, is a little more challenging because there might be interruptions or there might be little fires I need to put out. So in any case, I was very fortunate to have someone come in and teach my class so I can get through many students. And I think I got to student 18. I have 21 students, but I did have a handful of kids who were not in the classroom at that time or who were absent. So I would say I probably got through 2/3 of my class. I think that's good. So I'm including it as a fail, but it really isn't a fail because I always know that's about what I'm going to reach. That's about what's actually possible. I just always hope I get through more, but the reality is that it typically does not happen that way. Okay, you guys, that is it. That wraps up episode 64, Classroom Decor, too cute or too much? You decide. Well, and the research is out there. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on decor in the classroom? How would you like to add to this conversation? Go ahead and tweet to me at TammyJ123. That's at TAMIJ123. We'll see you next time. Wait a minute. Wait 1 minute. Before you go, don't forget you can catch our show notes online at www.timetoteach.libsyn. That's libsyn.com. We're also on Facebook at Time to Teach. Don't forget to check out our Facebook group, Teachers for Effective Curriculum. And if you're an educator with your own podcast show, I invite you to join our brand new Facebook group, Teachers Who Podcast. Let's grow a community where we can network, problem solve, and discuss anything and everything podcast related. I'll see you there.